Good to go. Thank you everyone for joining. So it's very interesting that the Baal HaTurim, one of the commentators on the Chumash, quoting from the Yalkut Shimoni, one of the Midrashim, on the very first word of our weekly Torah portion, Vayakhel, the Baal HaTurim writes, Vayakhel, why did it say Vayakhel? Lefi shebo loma Parshat Shabbos. Because actually this portion begins with the first few verses which deal with Shabbos. So just as on Shabbos and Yom Tov, everyone gathers together to hear the drasha, so too Moshe gathers the people together, and the Torah stresses it with the name of our parsha, Vayakhel. He gathers them together because he's going to teach them about Shabbos. I think perhaps uniquely, even those who don't necessarily come to shul religiously week in, week out, and maybe miss the drasha or don't miss the drasha, I think we wish, all of us, that we could be in shul tomorrow, we could be in Shomrei this Shabbat morning, gathered together to hear an actual live drasha. But I guess for now, this is going to suffice. And it's interesting, the Kli Yakar, a early modern commentator on the Chumash, lived in Prague, the rabbi in Prague, he writes, why was it necessary for Moshe to gather the people together specifically at this time? Clearly he taught the people Torah in the wilderness at various points, so why this parsha is it stress that he gathers them together? So Kli Yakar explains, based on Rashi's comment, that this parsha took place the day after Yom Kippur, the day after they achieved atonement for the golden calf, and they'd be given the second set of tablets. Moshe descends from the mountain, and he instructs the people to build the Mishkan. After the people are messed up in the wilderness by building the golden calf, and the ensuing tragedy, both the loss of human life, and also the estrangement, the distancing from God, the way to combat this, to rectify this, and to guarantee a mistake like this never happened again, the estrangement never happened again, Moshe gathers the people together. It's only when they're gathered together, unified as one, and he gives them a joint project, the project of the Mishkan. Does he think that will never return, will never repeat the mistakes of the past? Before, I want to share with you a couple of Torah thoughts to do with this week's Torah portion and the special portion of HaChodesh we're going to read. Let me just make a few practical points. Firstly, to say that Tali and I are here for everyone, and please don't hesitate to call. We're trying to reach out to people. We are, triaging. We're making a priority to reach out those people we think we need to first. But that doesn't mean we don't want to hear and be in touch with everyone. So please be in touch with us, even if we haven't yet been able to be directly in touch with you. We're all finding this tough. It's challenging for all of us. And there's no need to be embarrassed if you need to reach out for help, not necessarily for us, to anyone, even if you need to reach out professionally, to keep that in mind. These are unusual, strange times. I guess all the hang-ups people may have at other times, please put those aside and reach out for help if you need them. Now the situation develops and more people go into quarantine, we're going to need more volunteers. And so let's get the word out there that we'll need volunteers to do things like shopping or whatever. So please do sign up to volunteer. Our lives have been tossed upside down. Everything has changed, and the way we expected to do things has changed, both in our practical life, and this is true halachically as well. Those are the norms, halachic norms, the things we've expected the way to be a certain way. Clearly, they're not that way at the moment. So if you have any questions, it affects many areas of life, many sensitive areas of halachic life. So reach out to me, to us, and we'll try to navigate this together. Pesach is coming up, and it's happening this year. Even though I actually saw there's a petition to the Israeli Supreme Court by a citizen of the state of Israel that perhaps we could have a second month of Adar to make this year a leap year, thereby pushing Pesach off. I don't think it's going to happen for various reasons. Nonetheless, it's happening. Clearly, it's going to be, things are going to be different. Things are going to be challenging. I think if anything at this time and this year, it's all the more of an impetus to try to hold on and to try to maintain, especially Yom Tov in the special times of year, our treasured festivals. And we're going to work it out. Many people are working on this at the moment, and we'll come out with Shomrei with more information in the coming days, probably early next week. Another point is that there's no physical shul. Obviously, we aren't able to come together this Shabbos, but let's still all try to daven. And I suggest I am choosing a spot in my house to use that as my own little shul in my house. And it's important to note that sometimes less with more kavanah, less with more concentration, in a more deliberate way, with more depth of feeling, is better than saying a lot, even if we don't feel it. Doesn't mean we should spend less time, just means the time we do spend on prayer doesn't necessarily mean have to cover the whole of davening, cover the whole expanse of the siddur, but let's pick out the things we specifically connect to, the important parts of davening, and connect to them. Ideally, if we can, we're not going to have laning in shul. People should read through the parsha in English from the art scroll, or print out from online, read it yourself, including the extra parsha. In that way, you can maintain a semblance of what we would have had in shul. I know other communities are davening together, not on Shabbos, through Zoom. Not obviously as a minyan, but that sense of joining together. If there's a demand, maybe even just for the usual minyanim we have on Sunday morning, on Rosh Chodesh, if people are interested, perhaps get in touch with us. We can try to arrange something if there's enough interest to come together on Zoom. It's a really an unbelievable way to come together. I'm looking at all of you right now on my screen. I'm clicking through to come together and to, I guess, spend that time davening together, even if it's obviously not quite the same as coming to shul. So this week's portion is Vayakhel-Pekudei, and is dominated by the building of the Mishkan itself. We've been instructed how to build it, what to build, the architecture of it. Now these two portions are the action element of it. The people of Israel, under the tutelage of Moshe and Bezalel, the chief architect, are going ahead and building the Mishkan, fashioning the vessels, making the clothes for the Kohanim, and that really fills the two parshas that we would read this week. But as I mentioned, the first few verses of the parsha deal with the mitzvah of Shabbat, that great institution, Shabbos Kodesh. And these two things, Mishkan, the building of a tabernacle, a sanctuary, and Shabbos, are often put together. And Rav Soloveitchik and many, many others say the reason why these two are linked, they're intertwined, is because both the Mishkan, the Bet HaMikdash, and Shabbos represent sanctuaries. Sanctuaries for God in our lives. One is obviously a sanctuary in space, the Mishkan. One is a sanctuary in time, Shabbos. And Rabbi A.J. Heschel wrote a phenomenal book called The Sabbath, and I would recommend it, highly recommend it to everyone. It really, for me, was very formational, was very impactful. And he coined the phrase of Shabbos being the cathedral in the time. We think of cathedrals, those epic, magnificent places for religious introspection, for religious prayer, the beauty of them architecturally in space. So Shabbos is that in time. God, infinite being, decided to mitzamtzem, in Kabbalistic term, to limit himself, to confine himself, and to enter into our limited world, both in space, by entering his divine presence, concentrating his Shekhinah, his divine presence in the Mishkan. And so to God also limits and confines himself, as enters into the limitations of time, as we say every Friday night in Kabbalat Shabbat, Bo'ichala, Bo'ichala, come, O bride, we're beckoning in. The bride of Shabbos is none other than the Shekhinah, is God himself. On Shabbos, God enters into time, that special presence of God enters into the limitations of our temporal world. But Shabbos trumps Mishkan, and that's why actually in this week's portion, Shabbos is introduced before the building of the Mishkan, to tell us, yes, we have this important, crucial project of building the Mishkan, building a tabernacle for God, but don't forget Shabbos. And if anything, Shabbos precedes, Shabbos comes before the Mishkan. And why is that so? Says the Kliyakar, because the Mishkan, the institution, the existence of the Mishkan is actually dependent on Shabbos itself. And Rav Soloveitchik quotes from his grandfather, the Beis Halevi, who says in life there are necessities and there are luxuries. There are things we need, we all know it, the basics, the staples of life without which we cannot exist. Apparently at the moment that includes toilet paper. And there are the luxuries in life, the things we enjoy and we like to have, but we could go without. And that's obviously true in the physical world, in our secular, mundane lives, but it's also true in our religious, in the spiritual realm as well. It's not necessarily for us to define which is which, but there are certain mitzvot, there are certain elements of Jewish life which are luxuries, and obviously there's many elements which are necessities. The Beis Halevi said that the Mishkan, the idea of having a tabernacle, a temple in our midst, where God's Shekhinah, where God's presence rested, where we serve God in a most exalted way, that is indeed a luxury. Whereas Shabbos, that weekly institution of Shabbos, that is a Jewish necessity. Mishkan represents transcendental, supernatural relationship with God, where we met God on a different plane altogether, and we're able to exist without that. Shabbos, on the other hand, is where we meet God in a natural, this worldly way, and we're unable to live without that. And he points out that the Jews have fared quite well without a temple. For the last 1900 years, 19 centuries, we've lived without a temple. It's been difficult times in exile, but many of the greatest achievements of Judaism have happened in that period without a temple in the last 1900 years. On the other hand, we wouldn't be able to exist without Shabbos. It's interesting, during the 40 years in the wilderness, when the Jews had this tabernacle and they had the Mishkan, they never violated it, meaning they never thought to ransack it, to run an insurgency on it, even to make it profaned. On the other hand, we know that the Jews kept one Shabbos in the wilderness. Already on the second Shabbat onwards, they were unable to fully observe the Shabbos. We have that portion of the person who was collecting wood on the Shabbos, Makoshesh Eitzim. The Jewish people never fully observed another Shabbos after the first one. And there became a confusion between the necessities of life and the luxuries of life. And after the golden calf, where the Jewish people showed themselves to be in that confused state, the Torah needed to come along and tell us, however important the Mishkan is a religious luxury. Shabbos is a religious necessity. And that's why when the Mishkan is originally presented in the Torah in Parshas Teruma and Tetzaveh, there's no mention of Shabbos. The people intuitively understood that the Mishkan, that sanctuary in space, is so precious and so important, but it is a luxury, not a necessity. And it, of course, doesn't mean it would forego Shabbos. After the golden calf, we have to have Shabbos presented and taught to us before we come on to the Mishkan, to remind us what's a luxury and what is a necessity. And I think what we see from here is that we can survive without a shul. A shul modeled on a Mishkan, on the temple, is, after all, a luxury. It's a luxury we've taken for granted, a luxury we all love, a luxury which has become so important to us. But at the end of the day, here we are, and we're going into a Shabbos where we're going to survive intact without our physical communal space, without our shuls. But as we see from here, we see from the Torah presenting Shabbos before Mishkan, that Shabbos is a necessity. Without Shabbos and the other mitzvahs which are attached to our personal Jewish identity, our personal lives, which are attached to our familial home lives, without that type of relationship with God, without that direct relationship between us and God and us and our families and God, our Judaism will simply fall apart. We wouldn't have any Judaism left. All of us sitting at home, we're confined in space now. In many ways, we've lost the space axes of our existence. But we still have the time axes. If anything, we have more expansive time axes than ever before. And we still have our personal integrity. We're still who we are, who we've always been, and that ability to connect directly to God, even if not in the context of others, physically, in the context of our community. And thanks to technology, we're able to connect communally some way, but clearly not as the same way as before. And Shabbos has obviously become, and rightly become, a very communal time where we come together as a community in shul, we come together at home, spending Shabbat meals together. But perhaps now is the time to reinvigorate and to strengthen the Shabbos on an individual level and the Shabbos on a family level, to be able to glean from Shabbos and to take from Shabbos and to observe Shabbos in a way that strengthens that connection with God, that necessity of God's connection in the axes of time. We're told, and amazingly, in the Gemara in Shabbos, that if the Jewish people only observe two Shabbatot, Mashiach would come. There's a song by Mordechai ben David, just one Shabbos, reaching out, aspiring to that type of vision. I've seen online, and I think it's a very powerful point, that really perhaps this is our opportunity as a Jewish people to make this Shabbos different from all other Shabbatot. And so I reach out to you and I ask you, perhaps we can observe Shabbos and keep Shabbos. It will be a very, very different type of Shabbos, but keep Shabbos even if we haven't managed to keep it fully and in its proper way as before. You know, we've all been living online this last few days, and it's been a lifesaver, and it's going to be very, very hard to disconnect for 25 hours. It'll be healthy to disconnect, I think, that break from the onslaught of news and social media, but it's also going to be hard. So don't think just for, we can't drive, we can't do all these other things, perhaps what's usually the challenges of Shabbos. There's going to be other challenges of observing Shabbos, but let's do it. And the Kli Yakar says, why do the Jews need to keep 2 Shabbatot? Why not 1 or hundreds, right? Why 2 Shabbatot? He writes because there's 2 types of Shabbos. There's 2 types of Shabbatot. There's the Shabbos that remembers and recreates Shabbat Bereshit, when God rested in creation of the world. And he said there's a different type of Shabbos, what he calls Shabbos La'atid, the Shabbos of the future, i.e. a taste of the world to come. Usually Shabbos is a stop to our mundane activities, from our creativity, our busyness in the world, our building the world. Now perhaps Shabbos is even a deeper Shabbos, where we stopped interacting with the world in many ways, going out, building the world physically, as we would usually, and Shabbos representing a stop and a halt and the cessation of that. Perhaps we're entering into even a deeper Shabbos, a Shabbos which is the second type of Shabbos, a Shabbos of another worldly experience, harder to do in some ways, perhaps even all the more empowering, or even more enriching. We also read, beside Parshat Vayakhel-Pekudei this week, we read Parshat HaChodesh. Parshat HaChodesh, the 4th of the special Parshat, the Arba Parshat we read at this time of the year, we read the portion of God giving to Moshe the commandment of Jewish time, of creating a Jewish calendar where we start from the month of Nisan, we have a lunar calendar, and based on that, our festivals are fixed. Just with the creation of the world, the first thing to be created was time, explains the Vilna Gaon, and that is what Bereshit is, the creation of the first world, first word in the Torah tells us about a creation, of Shemayim va'aretz, but that comes after. The first thing is Bereshit, in the beginning, meaning there was a beginning, meaning the beginning of time, the creation of time. So too with the creation of the Jewish people, with our Exodus from Egypt, we Yetziat Mitzrayim on the 15th day of Nisan, all those thousands of years ago, we were created as a Jewish people. So too that had to be preceded with the creation not of time, but of Jewish time, of our unique Jewish lunar calendar. And as I mentioned before, we've lost so much in the dimension of space in our lives, where we've gained so much in the dimension of time. Now our usual schedules, our habits, our routines are completely blown out the water. But it's also a chance to reset, to recalibrate, to profoundly reassess how we use our time, what our days look like, what our minutes and hours add up to. And of course, myself included, we need distraction, and we need entertainment, and we need the connectivity. But let us not fall into, I guess, the pitfall or the trap of simply watching Netflix or TV or scrolling social media or checking the news all day and all night. I've actually read Netflix are going to downgrade the quality of their broadcasts in Europe because just so many people are on it all the time. Yes, we need those. We need to stay sane. We need to keep our minds off things. We need to be entertained. But let us also use our time well. And this is really an amazing opportunity in so many areas of life to learn new skills, to spend time if physically with family members who are there. Time we wouldn't have had before. Part of the times in the day and the week we weren't spending with them before, to see what their lives look like, to interact with them during those times, and to spend time with family or friends, not in our physical space, obviously not in person, but virtually. And let's also use this time to learn more Torah, to grow spiritually, to focus on our inner lives and our religious and spiritual lives. So I think, the message of this week's portion, Vayakhel-Pekudei, of Shabbos and of HaChodesh, or the special portion about the Jewish calendar, the Jewish month, for me are comforting. That we've lost Shul, we've lost the Mishkan of our lives, we've lost the physical space to meet in our religious lives, but we've nonetheless still got the other dimension, God in our personal lives, in the time of our lives. And secondly, let us use our time in general, Jewish time, to use all this time we're going to have at home without our usual schedules, to try to grow from it, to try to use it in a way that indeed when we emerge from this, we're bigger people. Greatness may be thrust upon us rather than reaching out for it. Perhaps this is an opportunity, not just a challenge, that will emerge from this with new skills and new relationships and a new depth and a new breadth and horizons that we wouldn't have necessarily had before. Shabbat Shalom. I wish everyone well. I wish everyone a peaceful, a restful Shabbat. And I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations online, these sessions online. And of course, as I said, reach out to us, reach out to Tali and me whenever you want. We are here for you. Reach out to each other. Stay connected, stay together, and stay strong. Shabbat Shalom.
Where's the video? We need to see what you can see. Where's our video?